Members, it's time to start our meeting, so please return to your seat. Let's get ourselves ready for the meeting. Members, it's already time. We've also formed a quorum. I call a meeting to order. We're supposed to start by 5:30. If necessary, I'll extend the meeting by 15 minutes. Just want to remind members that in relation to the matters discussed today, if you have direct or indirect pecuniary interest, please, in accordance with the provisions under 83A of the Rules of Procedures, disclose the nature of such matters. Please also note the provisions in relation to voting in matters with direct pecuniary interest of Rule 84 of the Rules of Procedures. We've only got one item on the agenda, FCR 2024-2540. The paper seeks to invite members to approve a 1.3% increase in the standard payment rates under the Comprehensive Social Security Assistance Scheme and the rates of allowances under the Social Security Allowance Scheme with effect from the 1st of February 2025, and note the estimated financial implication of $927 million each year arising from the first item. In fact, on the 22nd of November 2024, the Bureau consulted the views of the Welfare Services Panel at a special meeting. To answer your questions, we have the Undersecretary for Labour and Welfare, Mr. Ho Kai-ming, the Deputy Director of Social Welfare, Ms. Wang Yin-yi, PS for Labour and Welfare, Ivy Chen, and Senior Statisticians, Social Welfare, Mr. Andrew Kwan. I would like to give the floor to Reverend Kuhn, Chair of the WSP, to report on the deliberation. Thank you, Member. On the 22nd of November 2024, WSP had a special meeting to discuss the proposal. We supported the proposal, but we believe that the administration should review the adjustment system for CSSA standard payment rates, just to make sure that the money available is adequate to meet the needs. There should be a separate assessment in relation to the assets and income of the CSSA applicant, in particular the disabled and their family members, so as to ease the financial burden of the families. Members also noted the effectiveness of the EMSS, there is Employment Support Services Scheme under the CSSA. There should be more employers' participation so as to provide more choices, so as to assist them in returning to the labor force. The administration also made replies to our concerns and questions. Thank you. 8 members would like to ask questions. Let me read out their names. Mr. Shaman Kwong, Johnny Ng, Lam Chen Sheng, Teck Chi Yuen, Tang Ka Piu, Stanley Lee, Maggie Chen, So Chang Wing, and one more, Ms. Lam So Wei. 9 altogether. Members, please note that we are not having a meeting of the Welfare Services Panel. This is a meeting of the Finance Committee. So please stick to the financial aspect of the proposal. Mr. Chow. Well, of course, you have our support because we have to help the disabled, the disadvantaged. But then for OALA, I would like to say that it only accounts for a growing percentage of the government's expenditure, 5.7% in the past, currently 7.3%. For the absolute amount, $32 billion previously. Now, well, we have to spend 10 billion more, $40 billion. And in fact, our deficit is $100 billion. And also 100,000 applicants have been added to the list. Should we focus on those who need it? Now we have the OAA and the OALA, and the rates are quite different. It's a matter of 3 times. Should we be more vigorous in our investigation and assessment so as to avoid the abuse of our resources? Well, in fact, many people are saying that if you're paid in cash, it will not be discovered and the SWD won't be able to discover it. Well, the elderly population is growing, and so there will just be more and more joining the queue. Mr. Ho. Let me defer to the DD in relation to possible abuse or breaching the schemes. As to the point made by Dr. Chow, in fact, we've been watching it on a long-term basis. We'll also be watching the financial strength of the administration. In recent years, as a result of the growing old of the baby boomers, we have got a growing elderly population. Well, of course, we'll be watching it on a long-term basis. We'll be watching the bill on social welfare. Let me defer to Ms. Wong in relation to tackling the abuse. Ms. Wong, please. Thank you, Chair. Currently, when we have applicants for CSSA or OAA or OALA under the SSA, when a means testing element is involved, we remind the applicants to be honest in their declarations of their income and assets. Under the SWD, in fact, we have got special investigation teams, and we have been focusing on certain cases and will carry out an in-depth investigation so as to look at the accuracy of the assets and income declared. We have been working through interviews, and at the same time, in relation to relevant departments and organizations, we have been matching the records. In other words, we would like to send out the message to the public. We are talking about public money, whether we're talking about the CSSA or the SSA, you must be honest in your declarations. Otherwise, it will result in a criminal liability. Next, Mr. Johnny Ng. Thank you, Chair. Now, before the FC, we're being asked to approve a sum of $927 million. 160 million people will be involved. In relation to the disbursement of the money, does it involve the administrative costs, and what is the size of it? Are you going to rely on high tech so as to cut down on the admin costs? Another question is that lately the government has already said that for the CSSA, there will be an employment support services scheme. It will be good because it will help them to return to the labor market. Do you have a target to make sure that the able-bodied will go back to the labor market and cut down on our expenditure on CSSA? Mr. Chen can answer that question. Well, I'd like to thank the member for the support program for the unemployed. We will go back to the WSP for further details. Ms. Chen, please. Well, for the financial commitment of $927 million, it is purely for disbursement of the payments. Admin cost is not involved. It comes under the general operational expenditure of the department. Another question is about greater reliance on high taxes to cut down on the manpower resources needed. Again, can the DD or the PS members' view is noted. We'll try our best to see how, in a general sense, we can be more effective and efficient. But of course, we have to consider that for the recipients of CSSA and SSAs, they have a disadvantaged background, so they may have a weaker sort of capability in terms of high tech. What is the size of the admin cost, even though it doesn't get included in the figure of $9 to $7 billion? Do you have an assessment about the admin costs? PS. The admin cost comes under the program area of Social Security of the SWD. You don't have the specific figure with you? No, we don't. Next, Mr. Lam Chen Sing. Well, we're talking about an overall increase of 1.3%, but then for the range allowance, it's only 0.2%. So it's a matter of $5 or $10. So that's the MRA. And then, in fact, many recipients are paying a range higher than the MRA under the SSA. 10 years ago, it may be a matter of 7%. Last year, the exceedance was 14%. In other words, many recipients do not get a sufficient MRA to cover their rent. They have to save on other aspects so as to pay for the rent, and it would jeopardize their quality of life. And then for the subdivided units, once they have been improved, we will be looking at a rent increase, so the rent assistance would not be adequate. I know that you have got a mechanism. You look at the rent index of the CPIA, but then for the grassroots, they usually live in inadequate housing or subdivided units. So I just wonder if you can adjust the weighting so that you will be looking at the grassroots housing and you'll be looking at the subdivided units so that the rent levels can actually reflect their circumstances. And then not too long ago, the LWD has said that the able-bodied persons have to work without compensation. Well, I think we aren't talking about proper work, because if there is a formal employment relationship or labor relationship, we have to give a minimum wage. Now, what you have got in mind is to ask the able-bodied recipients to provide some sort of work. I just wondered if it can really address the problem of helping them to leave the CSSA net. I don't think there are too many abuses during the COVID or the pandemic. Well, for the workers who lost their jobs, they weren't able to qualify for CSSA because they have got assets that would exceed the minimum level. So just wonder if you're going to encourage the large corporations to provide more job opportunities to them, so that, say, for example, the carers can also try to have some form of work so that they can leave the SSA net. So by providing more support, you haven't answered Mr. Ng's question, but do you have anything for the long term so as to cut the number of recipients as well as the size of the expenditure? Say, for example, if you have got a target of cutting it by 2,000, well, we'll be saving, say, $100 million a month. So do you have any performance indicators? Well, for KPIs, perhaps the Undersecretary can give an answer again. I will defer to the PAS. As to the target of cutting the number of recipients, we may not consider that. Well, in fact, it is not easy to apply for CSSA if you are an able-bodied person and just because you're out of a job. So we are very vigorous, we are very stringent in giving approval because they're able to get employment. We will be working together with the ERB, and in fact, Mr. Lam is from the labor sector. I'm sure he is aware that the Labor Department has got many support schemes. So we will have a number of different schemes as to make sure that the recipients will leave the SA net as soon as possible and they can become self-reliant again. So that's the direction that we are adopting. And Ms. Chen can answer the other question. Well, concerning the rent allowance, well, some CSSA recipients live in private housing. Quite a large number of them live in public housing, and a lot of them also live in institutions. So for the rent index, we believe that the one that we've adopted is about right. Maybe Mr. Kwan can also look at the scope of the rent index. Well, for the CPIA, it covers all the households other than the CSSA households, as well as the top 5% and the lowest 5%. Currently, we are looking at a rent expenditure between $1,600 and $29,400 a month. So, and we don't have a rent index for subdivided units. So we believe that the CPIA rent index is about right. Mr. Ting, I support the funding request. After all, we are simply making adjustments in accordance with the index. I don't think they are having any real improvement in the amount of money received. Well, of course, the times have changed, and I hope that you can appreciate that under the CSSA system, some recipients are experiencing extreme difficulties or special difficulties. Some families are very special in their nature. Say, for example, for the disabled, they need more care, and then for SEN families, they would need more training, and they need support on many fronts in their daily lives. Subdivided units will be eradicated. I foresee that there will be an increase in the range. So CSSA families will have to spend more. I just want to know whether the government is going to address the special needs of the groups that I've referred to. Can they be given some sort of special treatment so that they can catch up with the living cost, which is rising?
Thank you, Undersecretary. Well, I understand the question raised by Mr. Tate. Actually, similar points were raised by some members at the last welfare panel meeting. For example, for persons with disabilities, there has been suggestions as to whether they can apply for CSSA on their own. But then this goes against the philosophy of the CSSA system because we use the household as a unit. So even the family may be of a middle income class, and then their family members may be living with the CSSA recipient. And I don't think Mr. Tate is referring to this point. Well, I'm actually asking whether there are some specific targets within the CSSA. If they can be helped by the family members, that will be the good case. But then some family members may not be helping the person who is in need of support for some households. Well, if they are cohabiting family members and they do not assist the recipient, they would need to explain to SWD why. Well, let's go back to my question. I'm asking whether you have special support for families who are living in subdivided units, who have children of special educational needs, or who have members with disability. Do you have special measures to assist them? Well, if we're talking about individual cases, we'll tackle them individually. But now we try to support the recipients on a household basis. Maybe I'll ask the PAS to supplement. Ms. Chan. Thank you, Chairman. For the CSSA allowance, the calculation depends on the recognized need of a family, and that will be deducted from their income. So first of all, we have taken into account the support by the other household members. Under the CSSA, we also have a lot of supplements to meet the special needs of the recipients. For example, we may have supplements for medical expenses on a reimbursement basis. So if they have special medical needs, then they would have a bigger amount of supplements. In general, every 5 years, we will try to review the base year for the CSSA and to see what is the latest household expenditure of the CSSA recipients. Well, because of societal changes, there may be changes in the expenditure, and then also there may be other changes. For example, we have included assistance for the use of mobile phones, etc. So every 5 years, when we try to find a new base year, we will try to look into the new expenses incurred by the families concerned. Chairman, I still have some time. A follow-up question. Well, for some households, they may be facing particular difficulties, and they have reflected to organizations like us. So you are just repeating what you have been doing. If it is adequate, then I would not be raising this point again. So I would like to put on record that for some CSSA families, they may be facing great pressure and difficulties, can you conduct a study to see if they are really facing difficulties and whether the CSSA system is adequate in helping them? This may involve a policy change. But I think at least I want to put down this marker that you should look into the situation. Please rest assured that we will put everything on the minutes. Anything to supplement, Under Secretary? No thanks. Next, Mr. Tan Kai Pyo. Thank you, Chairman. There is a system for revising the allowances under the CSSA system. And there have been discussions on this in the Legislative Council before. Well, I know that we are having a budget deficit, but I think we should still support the revision of the rates for this system. If they are able to take up employment, then let's try to help them to take up employment and try to reduce abuse cases. Well, last year, when we talk about this item, I'm a bit concerned about the service organizations who are providing employment support services. I'm wondering whether there are KPIs for them. Because if I remember correctly, I think some $200 million have been spent on the scheme. Now we have a new employment support scheme. You are now trying to arrange for the recipients to take up gainful employment. So my question is, first, how much more resources do you anticipate that will be incurred in running the new employment support program? I understand that you may have a fewer number of operators for the scheme. And so will less resources be incurred as a result? Secondly, how are you going to measure the effectiveness of the employment support programs? Actually, there have been suggestions that instead of arranging one-day gainful employment for them, maybe these organizations or operators should form some kind of an organization and let them take out the contract out work, low-skill jobs by the government. So maybe they can form a mutual help group together and then say for the first week they can test out to see whether they are suitable for taking up the employment, and if yes, then just employ them directly. Is that feasible? Under Secretary? Well, I think this is a very creative suggestion from Mr. Tang, but our objective is to let them have some working experience so that they will not be delinked from society. So initially, we are thinking of engaging NGOs to give them some gainful employment experience. Actually, the objective is similar to what Mr. Tang has pointed out, but I'll be happy to understand more about Mr. Tang's idea of forming cooperative units or organizations. And I would like to see if the Deputy Director have anything to supplement. So do you have information on the resources incurred for arranging for gainful employment by the operators? Well, we plan to roll out the SPU next year. And then next year, we will try to go for tender of the program operators. So the details are being mapped out at this point in time. So you cannot tell Mr. Tang about the effectiveness of the program then? Yes, Chairman. When we try to set out the explanatory note on the SPU, we will try to set out some performance indicators, and also we would ask the potential operators as to how they can run the program better. And during the pilot stage, we would set out what are the objectives that need to be achieved, maybe the number of recipients that they are going to help. So we will set that out in the tender document. Chairman, I think we must help the needy, but people may think that we are just trying to spend about $200 million to engage NGOs to ask the CSSA recipients to have gainful employment. I think people may think that it is not adequate because you're now rolling out a new program. So the resources incurred must be less than the former program. Can you make such an undertaking, Ms. Chen? Well, Chairman, the SPU will be more streamlined, so we think the cost incurred will be less than the previous program. Next, Mr. Stanley Lee. Thank you, Chairman. On the adjustment of the rates, I think some people may be disappointed, especially the elderly, because we're talking about just an increase of 1.3%. For the OAA, we are going to increase from $4,195 to $4,250 for the elderly person, a single person. So this is quite meager. I know that you have a mechanism, but how can you ensure that the mechanism will reflect the need, especially the elderly, in reality? Is it just an increase of $55 is adequate for 1 month for the elderly? So when you go for the 1.3% increase, you rely on a mechanism. But how are you going to ensure that the current mechanism is adequate and reflects reality? This is the first question. Second, some members have pointed out that you're going to roll out a support program for the unemployed, and you would ask them to work once at least a week for unpaid work. So this will involve some transport costs for the recipients. If they have to go and work for once a week, they would have to incur transport costs. So will that be reflected in future increases? 2 questions. I'll ask Mr. Kwan to take the first question on the mechanism, and then for the second question on the operation of the SPU, I will ask the DD to supplement. Mr. Kwan. Chairman, the proposed increase of 1.3% is depending on the SSAIP. It is actually an increase of prices. We're trying to measure the spending incurred by the CSSA recipients. So for the Social Security Assistance Index of Prices, it is very comprehensive. It covers food costs and then also other expenses like buying clothes, etc. So all the prices of goods, apart from the special grants or services provided by the government for free, all the other items have been included under the SSAIP. So for the past year, we noticed that there has been a 20% increase for cigarettes. That is about some 22%. But this is a very small amount, because it only accounts for 1.1%. For miscellaneous expenses, the increase is about 1.3%. Mainly is for miscellaneous expenses. For transport costs, the increase is about 2.6% because the MTR has increased by about 3.8%. Some members have pointed out that the transport costs need to be taken into consideration. So I want to point out that the 1.3% increase has taken into account that increase in transport costs, and then also the increase in cost for clothes about 0.1%, and then also other expenditure items. So as a whole, the sum adds up to be 1.3%. We also compare that with other price indexes. We also look at the CPIA cost for the non-CSSA recipients, because for the CSSA, there is the inclusion for the rent allowance. If we look at the CPIA excluding accommodation, the increase is only 1.5%, so it is similar to our proposed rate of increase. So that's why we think that the proposed increase is reasonable. Deputy Director, Ms. Wong. Chairman, the CSSA has provided cash assistance for the recipients so as to meet basic living needs. For the support program for the unemployed, they will be divided into different regions. We will try to liaise with the welfare NGOs and the district organizations so that we can form partnerships to assist participants of the SPU. So those will be able-bodied CSSA recipients. We will try to find suitable unpaid work for them. So since we have already given out a standard rates payment, so they will not get extra payment because of this unpaid job. And I think they can still make use of the services that are free provided by the Labor Department and the ERB. And then we also encourage them to take up programs by these organizations, which may provide some sort of allowances for them.
Next, Ms. Maggie Chen. I support the funding request, Chair. Like other members, I'm in support of helping the disadvantaged. I want to pick up the point made by other members in relation to the support program for the unemployed. For this program, it is going to apply to those aged between 15 and 59, able-bodied but unemployed. For this new program, how many will be caught under this scheme, that is those aged between 15 and 59? I just wonder if this can help to cut the total expenditure on CSSA for the unemployed. And then for NGOs who are getting service from such recipients, I want to know whether the NGOs is going to put up the admin costs, or is the NGO going to get paid for the administration? And then for the program, is the administration cost going to be larger than the savings we can gain by reducing the number of recipients of CSSA? Our assessment is that 10,000 recipients have to take part in this program. There are about 15,000 who are recipients of CSSA for the unemployed. There are people who can't go to work, say, for example, they are at school or they have to stay at home to take care of the young or to take care of the sick family members. But then there will still be 10,000 recipients who will join the program. Maybe the PS can supplement. Yes, PS, please. Well, regarding the cost, as we have said, we believe that the program is going to be very streamlined, so the cost will be lower than what we are paying currently. Currently, the cost we talk about is to pay the operators because they have to bear the cost of contacting the recipients and making arrangements and take care of the recipients. And so liaison work, such will be paid for by the administration. We haven't actually compared as to how much savings we can achieve as a result. This is because it is an innovative idea, and we are going to run it for 2 years as a pilot scheme. And then we'd like to gather the information, that is whether they're able to comply with the requirements. And then we'll also like to gather the data concerning non-compliance and penalties. So we want to look at the effectiveness of the program. Chair, if I may follow up. It is said that for the time being, it's difficult to assess the effectiveness of the program. We have got $100 billion being the size of our deficit, and yet you have to pay for the administration costs of the NGOs. On the other hand, the government has to bear some administration costs itself as well, while not knowing the effectiveness of the program. I think the NGO should be given some KPIs because they're charging the administration for running the scheme. So if we are unsure of the effectiveness, then I don't think it's quite acceptable when we are having a $100 billion financial or fiscal deficit. Well, Chair, it will be difficult to have a figure, that is the number of recipients that will leave the CSSA net. We can't force people to leave the CSSA net. If they have the need, then they are eligible for CSSA. But then if they can, they should rejoin the labor force. So it will be difficult to compare. we have FSAs with the operators. We do have KPIs for the organizations, say, for example, the number of attendees, etc. So there will be KPIs for the operators, but we're still having the tendering exercise. As to the amount of money to be saved, well, in fact, we don't have a quantitative figure, say, cutting a specific number of recipients. Mr. So Chang-Wing, thank you, Chair. I support the rate of increase. As we have read from the paper, 1.6 million people are receiving the assistance. So a huge number of people will be affected. Some members did ask this question. That is the justification for increasing it by 1.3%. We have been told by a public officer that it is the CSSA index, but in fact in the paper it is the SSAIP. It's 1.3% for CSSA as well as SSA, covering the elderly, the disabled, etc., etc. So is it your usual practice? That is, you will simply look at the SSAIP and then you adopt that single figure for everything? Or do you make a distinction among the various groups? 1.3%, whether you increase it by 1.3% or decrease it by 1.3%, probably the absolute amount is small. But then should the figure be higher, then you have to bear in mind the differences among the different groups of recipients. Now, we have got an unemployment rate of 3.1%. This is quite a good figure. But what about changes in the number of people who are unemployed? Does it have a relationship with the changes in the number of recipients of CSSA or SSA? Mr. Ho, I defer the first question to the PAS. For the second point, Mr. So is right. Well, since the pandemic, and we have seen that the number of CSSA recipients coming down, in particular, those who are unemployed. For CSSA recipients, we have got more who are disabled or elderly. But then for those who got CSSA because of unemployment, that number has come down. So if the unemployment rate remains at a low level, then we hope that the able-bodied will rejoin the labor force and we can cut our expenditure in this regard. For the first question, Ms. Chen, please. Ms. Chen. Indeed, Chair. Be it CSSA or SSA, we do follow the yearly changes of the SSAIP. But each family will have a different amount to be disbursed. So individual recipients will receive a different amount. For the unemployed CSSA recipients and its relationship with the unemployment rate, the Census and Statistics Department did carry out an analysis. Yes, there is some bearing, but then they don't always go hand in hand. Sometimes the unemployment rate may go up, but then the recipients who are unemployed do not go up in a proportional manner. The unemployment rate has come down. I want to know whether the number of recipients has come down. We have been criticizing a particular phenomenon because there is indeed a degree of abuse concerning CSSA. The unemployment picture has improved, but if we don't see a smaller recipients, then how are you going to address the problem? Is the observation correct? If I may add to the answer, the statistics, the Census and Statistics Department will look at it in a statistician's point of view. But then for the SWD, if you want to get CSSA, you have to pass the asset test or the income test. If you have a high level of assets, even if you're unemployed, you may not come to get it. For the unemployment cases, the number is coming down year by year. And in fact, we are having the lowest number for quite a number of years. Ms. Lam. Thank you, Chair. We talk about making adjustments to the payment rates of CSSA and SSA. 1.3% increase is being recommended, costing us $927 million. Is it going to be money well spent? Well, let's look at the arrangements. For the DA, an increase of $67 million, but I don't think the amount is adequate for such families. Now, the assessment is family-based. Many families don't get it because they exceed the financial limits. Even if they eventually get it, the amount of money dispersed is too low. I think the government should think out of the box. The disabled persons should be allowed to apply for CSSA independently, separate from their family members. In the long term, it will be good. In this way, the disabled can remain in the community and they don't have to live separately from their family member or have to be admitted to an institution prematurely. So for the $927 million to be dispersed, are you going to set aside an amount of money to try out some new ideas? Say, for example, allow DA applicants to be assessed independently. I think this will benefit us in the long term. In this way, you will get empirical evidence. Mr. Ho. $927 million. It is an overall sum. It will be difficult to carve out a portion to run a pilot scheme. I can appreciate Ms. Lam's ideas, but then if a disabled person is within the public healthcare system, then the hospital authority and in that sense the government picks up the majority of the medical bill, and we hope that the family members will provide support as well. I think you cannot regard it as a well, in fact, for the system we are talking about, there is also free medical care. So if you have a major overhaul, it will mean a major change to the system. So we'll still insist that the family support should be counted, and then someone cannot be allowed to stay with the family and get the assistance separately, independently. I don't think if we allow that to happen, our welfare system won't be able to sustain. Chair, the Undersecretary said that we have got the higher DA, but then indeed for higher DA, they can't cover their medical costs. The recipients can't rely on that for the medical costs. So the families cannot bear the cost, cannot afford it, and they are in financial difficulties. So I urge the administration to look at the case of such a group of recipients. Undersecretary, Ms. Lam's point is noted. For welfare issues, I would like to urge Ms. Lam to pick up the matter again at the WSP meetings.
There are still 3 members who would like to speak. If there are other members who would like to speak, please press the button. If not, then I'll put the item to vote. Now we have one more member. Next, Ms. Wendy Hong. Thank you, Chairman. I think I agree that we should support the needy, but then the resources should be put to good use. I have 2 questions. First, For the SSA, it is largely related to the elderly. We are now facing an aging issue. People in Hong Kong who are aged 65 accounts for about 25% of our total population, but by 2039, the number of elderly people will be some 25 million, 2.52 million, account for 31% of our population. So the expenses has been increased by some 74% for the subsidy for the elderly, and it is higher than the annual increase of the government expenditure as a whole by some 5%, 5.7%. We also have a recurring increase of about 2.2%, so I have a big question mark. The expenses on welfare has been increasing rapidly. For the SSA, I wonder whether we should continue to have the same mechanism. Should we plan ahead in anticipation of the aging of our population, and then also have financing for the elderly? Will we try to follow the pension program for the civil servants, so that you will try to have a sum of money and then invest in it to generate income for the purpose, to have a similar scheme so as to meet the future expenditure for SSA in future? Also, can we encourage them to buy their own property and use reverse mortgage so as to help the elderly to take care of themselves? I know this may go beyond the LWB, but I think we should really think ahead and take that into account. Now for CSSA, we now have a support program for the unemployed, and the government will ask the NGOs to be operators and assist the unemployed able CSS recipients to gain work. But then you have to spend a lot of money on that. And we noticed that in last year, only about 300 to 400 people are able to get employment through the scheme. So the cost is actually higher than that for the CSSA that they are receiving. So I would really want the government to review the effectiveness of the employment support program. Well, starting from October next year, the government will require the unemployed able-bodied CSSA to join unpaid work arranged by the operators for at least a year. So I would like to know what would be the cost incurred for this program, or the cost will be covered by the existing support for self-reliance program. So, Undersecretary, can you respond succinctly? Well, I think the second question raised by Ms. Hong is actually very pertinent. We're saying that we will have a new program to replace the existing EMSS, and we will require the recipients to take up unpaid work so that they will gain some working experience. So the cost for the new program will be reduced. We have already answered that question. For the other question as to how we can help the elderly support themselves after retirement, I think the Deputy Financial Secretary has actually formed a task force trying to look at how we can use reverse mortgage or annuity program, etc., to help our elderly plan for their retirement. And we hope that there will be sustainability for the elderly who retire in Hong Kong that will be taken into account by the working group. Next, Ms. Eunice Yong. Chairman, I know that for the OALA, especially on page 3, paragraph 7 of the paper, it is stated that up to October 2024, you have a lot of SSA recipients, and some of them are receiving OALA, and the figure is quite high, about 770,000. And every year we have to spend about $42.3 billion. So the figure has been increasing. So as compared to 2020-21, we now have actually a double increase. Back in 2020-21 for OALA and the DA is only about some $22.4 million. So we can see that the increase is very substantial. I noticed that the government has been conducting reviews, and you have tried to identify abuse cases and recipients who are not eligible. But I know that by 23-24, we have about 120,000 cases which are subject to review. So I would like to know, now we are in October 2024. So how many of these cases are being reviewed, and how much is the cost incurred? We can see that the figures are increasing. So a lot of ineligible persons are trying to apply for it. So how are we going to help drive them away so that the resources will be more targeted for the really needy people? I would like to know the figures involved, Chairman. I would like to know how much are we spending and how much have we recovered from these abuses. The Deputy Director has pointed out that we scrutinize the cases seriously. We try to identify fraud cases. I would ask her to supplement on that. On the review of OALA concerning elderly people, we would review the cases once every 2 years, and we look at the assets that they have. So there are biannual reviews. They have to report to us that they are still eligible for the Social Security assistance. So I will ask the Deputy Director to supplement. For the recent years, there have been substantial increase because, as I said, we have a wave of retirement in recent years. After these few years, the population structure will change a bit. There will be less people retiring because we have less people born 60 years ago. So the rate of increase may slow down a bit. So I would defer to the Deputy Director. Ms. Wong? Chairman, for CSSA and SSA recipients, we have a mechanism to review the application cases on a risk-based approach. For the OALA, we scrutinize the cases vigorously. When we review the case, we also have a mechanism in place. I do not have the figures at hand, but I would like to let you know that our colleagues will seriously review the cases. As I've mentioned before, we will liaise with the recipient, and we will also work with the departments and organizations concerned to verify the data. And when we do the asset assessment, we will try to see whether the information provided by the applicant is valid. Ms. Yong, do you need supplementary information? That is the number of cases involved and the amount of allowances involved. Yes, Chairman. We noticed that every year over 1,600 or 2,000 people are not eligible, and yet they put in applications. So can you give me a table listing out how many applicants are not eligible and how much money do they owe the government and how much has the government recover from them? So please provide the information in writing after the meeting. Next, Mr. Kenneth Lau. Chairman, now we're saying that looking at the paper whereby the government would increase the payment rates by 1.3% regarding CSSA and the SSA, incurring a cost of about $927 million every year. We are looking at this proposal. Every month, I think the elderly and the persons with disability, they rely on these allowances to make a living. And I noticed that there will be increase in expenditure for social welfare. It has been increased quite a bit over the past 5 years. We are having an economic slowdown, and we have a huge budget deficit of $100 billion. So I think we should really look carefully at the expenditure. And the policy objective is to really help people who are in need. But then there are people who are trying to get around the system. For example, they put their assets under the names of the relatives, or they use other ways to get around the system. And it seems that the government is not really cramming down on these abuses vigorously. the government has been trying to crack down on abuses for public housing units, and then you check the residents biannually. So I would like to know whether there will be similar arrangements for the CSSA recipients. Undersecretary. Chairman, for the review of the CSSA cases, we review them actually very regularly. For the able-bodied CSSA recipients who are unemployed, we review the case annually. For the elderly recipients or households which comprise only elderly, we review them once every 3 years, triannually. We also have special reviews, and we try to cross our information with the data by other departments like Labor Department, IRD, etc., and the electricity company. And every quarter, we match our data with the ERB and the HA. Also, we liaise with the Land Registry, the Company Registry, and the Transport Department. And also, we try to match data with the WFCSSA. And then we do have a mechanism to identify the abuse cases. So Mr. Lau is asking whether you will put in more resources for the purpose, for people who try to move their asset away under their name. Deputy Director, Chairman, actually the SWD has been working vigorously to identify the abuses, and we try to put in preventive measures. The Deputy Director has pointed out that we look into every case carefully, and we have also provided more manpower resources for the purpose. Back in 2019, the department has a reorganization, and we now have 6 teams who are trying to identify the abuses. They are the special investigation teams. And we also have a chief social welfare officer to focus on the crackdown of abuse cases. For the investigation teams, we also provide hotlines, and we have people answering reports of abuse cases. During our daily work, we also receive possible abuse cases from the citizens. And whether they're anonymous or not, we will look into these reports seriously. So I would like to let you know that we have spared no effort in this regard. Any further members who would like to speak? Then Ms. Doreen Kong will be the last to speak. Thank you, Chairman. To help the elderly and persons with disability and the needy, I think is really necessary. So I support the proposal of increasing the rates by 1.3%. But like other members, I am also concerned about the sustainability of this system. I noticed that in 2023-24, the number of taxpayers in Hong Kong is about 2.44 million. According to the paper, the number of CSSA recipients is about 1.6 million. So that means the proportion between the taxpayers and the CSSA recipients is 1 to 1.5. So we should be concerned about these figures. In the past decade, I noticed that from 2013 to 2023, the number of CSSA recipients have increased, or is more or less about some 200,000 in number. But we can see that aging and then also permanent disability, or people who have long-term illness have increased substantially from 74.4% to 78.5%. So I think this will further increase with the aging of our population. So I would like to ask the administration, the ratio that I have pointed out, the ratio between taxpayers and CSSA recipients, how can you ensure that the ratio will be reduced, or at least we will be able to sustain the CSSA system financially? Deputy Secretary, I think Ms. Kong is pointing out that the number of recipients of 1.6 million is for all programs under the welfare portfolio. So the figures for CSSA is actually not that high. It is only about from 200,000 in number. So her figure also includes the recipients of the disability allowance and the SA. So we will look into the financial sustainability of the system, because this is a big topic for the SAR government. So it's not just the LWB, but the relevant officers will look at the financial situation holistically.
I did ask if you have got questions, and I did say that I drew a line after Ms. Doreen Kong has spoken. Mr. Im has just joined us. I can only give you 2 minutes. Thank you, Chair. 2 minutes would do. On my part, I support the proposal to approve a 1.3% increase in accordance with the index. As the administration has said, there may be CSSA recipients who own luxurious homes overseas, or they have deposits of a substantial amount. I understand that investigations have been started. So how many cases have been under investigation in the past year as a result of your random checks? I think the Undersecretary didn't have the figures with him today, so he has already promised to prepare a paper for us. Am I right? Well, the number of reviews was the subject matter we referred to earlier on. As the number of random checks, again, we can provide the information later. If you don't have other questions, I will put the matter to the vote. Paper FCR 2024-2540. Those who are in support of the proposal therein, a show of hands, please. Thank you. Does any member vote against the proposal? No. I believe that the majority of members who voted are in favor of the proposal. I declare the motion passed. Our next meeting will be held on the 13th of December this year. Meeting adjourned. Thank you.